All right, welcome everybody to the Easy Writer Guest Expert Series. Today we have Phil Bohlender, and I am so excited that he's going to be sharing with us today. Phil has just a plethora of experience in the corporate world, flying all around the place too, and he's going to be sharing with us some of the stories about, triumphs and struggles, and also what he's learned from that we can then now apply into our world, whether we're coaches or whether we're still in the corporate area or whatever, that we can use what he's going to share with us today in order to better our lives, our businesses, and, maybe even our relationships. I don't know. It might be a surprise. I just threw that in there for you, Phil.
Uh-oh.
So how this is going to be set up, Phil's going to share with us, and then we're going to have some teaching moments from Phil as well, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. So I am going to sit here and sip my drink and enjoy myself. Take it away, Phil.
Excellent. Thank you, Vicki. I really appreciate this a lot. The opportunity, yes, it's very amazing. Taking a deep breath. So where I want to start is, you mentioned that I was a corporate citizen, and yes, I was. I worked for 35 years in corporations, and those were on 5 continents and 20 countries. And so what was interesting about it is I had roles both as a leader and a consultant. And when I look back on some of the things that I think were most significant about my career, the things that I feel that I was most celebrated for, one that comes to mind is I was actually nominated and was named Employee of the Month twice at Prudential Insurance with a population of probably about 35 or 40,000 employees. And so what was interesting about that was not once, but twice I was Employee of the Month. And so that was a first that I was nominated by my entire team that reported to me. They all signed the nomination. The second was a client that I was working with internally. She nominated us. And so as a team, that was another first. We were nominated Employee of the Month. And I was the first person and only person ever to be nominated twice. So when I think back on that, that was a pretty big deal. It's still a pretty big deal. And I look at the plaque every once in a while to remind me of that. The other thing that comes to mind is I was a part of what we called customer action teams, and they were about improving operations and processes and that type of stuff. And one of the things that I did that I really don't talk about much, however, I am the one who introduced the interactive voice response to healthcare operations. And those of you who know, push 1 for this and push 2 for that, that started with me calling into my bank, hearing that, and realizing that there was an application within the healthcare system. So I introduced that to healthcare operations back in we won't tell the year. And it was interesting because the connection is that I introduced that, and a senior vice president was at the presentation who was sitting next to me at the Employee of the Month luncheon at headquarters and was telling the story and bragging on me while I was sitting right next to him. So I was like, oh my. So anyway, those were a couple things that were really, really fun. The other thing that I really enjoyed and got a lot of accolades around was the turnaround activities. So I would go into organizations that were either in chaos or starting up and actually put in place all of the sustainable model that needed to be put in. And so I did that probably about 10 or 12 times with groups as small as 5 or 10 and as big as thousands. So that was a big deal for me to be able to do that. So, and most recently, Vicki knows about this, I am a 2-time international Amazon best-selling author. So first on my own, and that was a real struggle. And secondly, with Vicki's help, and that was like smooth as ice. It was just really great to work with her and be able to achieve that. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So those are some of the things that I think I did really, really well, and I got a lot of accolades and recognition for. All the while this is going on, I'm taking a lot of risks in my career. I'm jumping out there courageously. I'm fearless and taking on jobs that no one else will take. They're basically the jobs that you either succeed, or if you fail, that's the end of your career, because nobody wants to hire somebody who can't do the turnaround. All the while, I'm struggling with this fear of heights, and I'm terrified of heights. And I'm like, how does this make sense? I'm taking on the biggest jobs that are available in corporate America, and yet I won't get in an elevator that can look out or get on top of something that's too high for me. So what happened was in 2002, really quickly, I actually faced my fear and climbed the Sydney Harbor Bridge. And so it was very interesting to finally come face to face with my fear and realize that if I can be the guy who takes on all these career opportunities that could end in no career, why wouldn't I be able to go to the top of this bridge? So I went to the top of the bridge. I got hooked on the feelings that you get after doing the things that scare the willies out of you. So that was very, very exciting. And so many people don't know that I did that. I don't really talk a lot about it. And yet it's a part of my journey to become the whole person that I am today. So it's really interesting, and I take a pause, it's really interesting to acknowledge the struggles and the challenges and the obstacles that we encounter. So what you might imagine, by reaching the age of 60, I've had my fair share of them. And the one that I want to talk about today, I can smile about. However, at the time, and some of the emotions may come up. At the time, I was distraught. I felt betrayed. I felt lost. I felt confused. I didn't know which way to turn. And it all centered around the fact that I was in a relationship about 9 years, and we had made the decision to move from the town in North Texas back to San Antonio, where we'd lived for 4 years and had a lot of friends and all of that type of stuff. So as we made this joint decision, my partner and I were getting ready to move back to San Antonio. I start looking for a job, and one of the jobs that's open is with his former boss and all of the colleagues that he worked with. So I take the job, and I'm all excited that we're moving back to San Antonio. Well, we sit down one morning before church on Sunday, and we're going to meet with the realtor, and I have very strong intuition, and I say to him, am I buying a house in San Antonio for me or for us? And he said, buy your own house, and got up and walked away. And in that moment, I learned that I was now single, moving to a new city that I'd lived in before, however, and going to be working for his former boss and with all of his colleagues. So you might imagine I said to the realtor when she came and sat down, we need to sell this house really fast. I need to get out of this, make a clean break. Get to the airport that evening. His mother drove me. He didn't even drive me to the airport. Get to the airport that evening, and we'd always talk to each other before flights, after flights, all of that type of stuff that some couples do. And when I looked down at my phone to call him that I was at the airport safely, I deleted his contact information. And so what happened was, it started this whole thing of being sad and depressed and confused and lost and uncomfortable in my own skin and not really knowing what to do next. And really feeling a lot of big feelings that I came to realize were depression, anxiety, and all of that. And so for me, it was the first time that I stood still long enough to realize that I was in that. And so what happened was, when I went into the job, as you might imagine, it was a bit awkward. I'm working for his former boss, who was a social friend of ours, and his colleagues. I threw myself into the job. I plunged myself into the job, put the depression and anxiety to the side, and just focused on doing the best job I could do. And in doing so, I met all the metrics and expectations and earned a bonus in the first 6 months that I was there. All the while, I'm going home and pulling the covers over my head, not eating as much as I would normally eat, being really afraid and scared of getting out. I didn't want to meet new people. I didn't want to go anywhere in San Antonio because I might bump into somebody that he and I both knew. So it was just a really awkward time for me, and one that really caused me to retract and isolate a lot. So what happened after that was, I left that company as a result of a reorganization, and I went on to work for a manufacturing company, which was quite interesting because I'd never done that before. What happened there was, it helped me to start to understand what I might want to do with the third of my life. And so what happened was, I started to get some sense of, when I left corporate, what I might do. Well, I had another abrupt ending, which was the abrupt ending of the job that I held until I retired. And so what happened was, I sat there and meditated and did all the things to try to figure out what I want to do. And I decided that I want to be able to use my experience for good. I want to be that good person offering good. So what I decided was, I wanted to be able to help people achieve their aspirations. So let's go get some goals and meet them. I wanted to help people understand how to bounce back from situations, because let's face it, whether it's a divorce or a job loss or whatever catastrophic event that you've had, you want to bounce back from it. And then how can we frame consequences that from our courage and our fearlessness that are both positive and negative so that we can continue to do them. So that led me today to being this entrepreneur. And ironically, I have an article coming out, The Executive to the Entrepreneur. And so as an entrepreneur, I'm learning all these new things every day. And at the same time, I'm reflecting on all these things that brought me to where I am today. So with that in mind, Vickie, I'm just going to share that I have this book out. It's called 7 Essential Traits of Leaders. And I want to just share the 7 traits and then 1 trait a little bit more. So the 7 Essential Traits of Leaders book is the model of leadership that I built over the 35 years. And it's really, it's meant to go linear and it's meant to go circular, which is to say you can start with the first trait or you can start with any trait in between, as long as you cover all the traits to build your unique leadership model. So it is listening, empowering, achieving, directing, educating, recognizing, and serving. And for me, these are the 7 essential traits of being a leader. A leader in manufacturing, a leader in service, a leader in whatever position. So with that in mind, what I think is, quickly, listening is the foundation. Communication is key in all of these situations as a leader. Listening is the key. Listening to others is going to make the difference in terms of building strong relationships, building respect, trust, and all those things that are really critical for people to be able to align with the mission and align with the leader. So I used to work, this was a long time ago, I worked for a leader and I would count it. I would look at him in the eyes and I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words, and on the 6th word, he was gone. So what I did was, rather than train him how to listen to me, I learned how to say things in 5 words or less. I know that's hard to believe, but I could do it, and I did it for a while. Then I worked with people that really modeled it for me. My coaches modeled it for me, and some leaders I worked with modeled it for me. And I really came to understand the power of being a listener. So one of the things that I'm proud of is that I'm known today as a listener, which is a really good thing when you're a coach and a consultant, because it's one of the ways that you bring in information. So that's sort of how I started out and created these successes in 35 years, overcame some fears. I only shared one with you, there's more, and then was able to get through a pretty difficult, challenging time in my life at 50, which is when you expect to be hitting a plateau, and I was starting all over. I've got these 3 reasons for why I'm doing what I'm doing, focused on other people. And now today, I'm really excited about being this executive to entrepreneur person.
Awesome. So, Phil.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me a little bit more about the 7 steps. You went through them really quickly. I was trying to write them down.
Yes.
I kind of wanted to type them in the chat. Can you tell the 7, it's traits you're calling them, right?
Yes, 7 essential traits of leaders.
Okay, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number 1.
Listening.
Listening. 2.
Empowering.
3.
Achieving.
4.
Directing.
5.
Educating.
6.
Recognizing.
Hopefully I'm typing everything in right. 7.
Serving.
Yes. All right, so you said you were going to go into the listening, right? You talked a little bit more about the listening.
Yes.
So when we're in a situation that, like you were saying, right? The person's checking out. The person has a short attention span. Maybe you think they're not really, maybe they don't like you very much, right? And you need to have a conversation with them, whether it's about a project, a situation, or whatever. How do you get them to feel like you're listening and then actively participate in that conversation? Because sometimes it feels like you're pulling teeth, right? You're like, you ask a question, you get a 1 answer, a 1-word answer, and it's like, okay, can you elaborate, like without my asking you to elaborate? How do you get that going?
Thank you. That's a really great question. So part of the reason I'm known as a good listener is I've made the transition from looking at your nose to looking in your eyes. Because originally what I would do is I would look at people's nose, because I was too insecure and intimidated by people. So I'd look at their nose because I was told it looks like you're looking in their eyes. Well, then
But it really doesn't.
right? Exactly. I found that out the hard way. So then what happened was I started looking in people's eyes and I started having connections with them. And I started seeing beyond who they were, you know, the apprehensions or the fears or the insecurities or other things that happened for them. So one of the things that I would do would be to take the focus off of them in that exercise of listening and put it on me in terms of, can you help me understand or can you tell me more? And by doing that and asking it in an authentic way, not like the 5 whys of Kaizen where you just keep saying why, weave it into the conversation. And what happens is there's this shift that happens for them and they just start talking naturally because they feel and sense that you're genuinely interested. The eye contact and then just a couple key phrases, help me understand.
You know, it's so interesting you're talking about the eye contact because I tend to look at people's mouths when they talk. And I actually read this article a while back that people who are bilingual tend to look at people's mouths.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, that's a good excuse for why I do that.
I like that one. I like that one a lot.
And it's because of the way you watch them articulate and whatever. So I don't know if I just started doing that from when I was little. I always look at people's mouths, and then it makes it really hard to recognize them when you see them at the next networking event because you didn't really look at
only from here down. I like that a lot. That's good.
Yeah, so good tips on the listening.
Thank you.
Can you, like, one by one with, I know we weren't going to go deep into all 7 of them. Can you describe in like a 5 words or like you said,
5 words.
Each of the other 6?
Okay.
So you have a little more rounded idea of the 7 traits.
Exactly. Thank you. And keep in mind, these are integrated. And as I said in the beginning, you can choose to read it linear from the left brain, the first one through the 7th one, or you can choose to pick up the book and read one at a time and build it all together. So empowering really is about delegating and following through. This is a skills building trait. And then achieving, of course, is winning. We do business because we want to win. We want to win profits. We want to win customers. So achieving is winning. Directing is an assertive behavior, not aggressive, assertive. So what that means is you're working with others to create the win-win situation. So directing is about assertiveness and win-win. Educating is called training and development in the corporate world. And so it's all about making sure that you invest the time and the resources in individuals to be able to be equipped to do their jobs. And then recognizing is, good morning, Vickie, how are you? And then staying around long enough to hear you say something other than fine or okay. Using people's names, looking at them in the eye. So those are the recognizing activities. And then serving really is a jump off from the servant leadership model, which is to say that as a leader, I am there to serve those who work with me and make sure that all the barriers and obstacles to them being successful are removed. So those are each of the 6 plus the 1. And how I frame them in a little bit more than 5 words each.
Awesome. I'm going to open it up to questions in a second. I have one last question before we do that.
Yes.
Do you find that any of these are a little different if you're talking with a male versus a female?
So I love that question. And in fact, I've written an article on the cross-gender mentoring and coaching. And it's very interesting because I told someone the other day that men communicate like this, facing out, and women communicate like this, facing in, right? And so what happens is when you have a male-female relationship, it's going to look like this, right? So what happens is I've often thought and continue to think that if I have the knowledge or the knowledge, the expertise, the skill or whatever, it's my responsibility to flex and move into the other person. So for example, if I'm the man and she's the woman, then what happens is I'm not expecting the woman to do this, I'm going to do this. And what that means is using words and using gestures with women that make them feel more comfortable. And especially in this day and age, with everything that keeps coming out, I think more of us men can be stepping up and being there for women, the same as women can be there for men.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the, I know I said I was only going to ask the one question, but
That's
now
okay.
you get curiosity up. What are the different gestures?
So men tend to lean back, women tend to lean in, right? I was the guy who had a corporate office where my desk was facing the wall and my space was open when people walked in. So if you can imagine walking into an office, there's a table and some chairs and then an open space. And I'm sitting, I know it's not good feng shui, I'm sitting with my back to the door because it creates an open space, right? And the other thing is that no matter what the person's style is, and this is men and women, women have all different styles as well. Be able to meet them where they are. If they're a direct style, get right to it. Good morning, how are you? Do you have an agenda? If they're more friendly, good morning, how are you? How was your weekend? How's your family? Meet them where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to be that direct person, and then I have to back up and go, oh, wait a minute, let me ask a couple questions about how they are first before I jump into this is what we need to do today, and this is how it's going to get done, and, you know, what do you think?
Just that one thing, Vickie, just that one thing in my career, and I learned it early on, just that one thing where you meet people where they are, it sort of brings everything down for them. I had somebody the other day that I was meeting with real quick. And what happened was, one of the questions I asked when I'm meeting with people is, what are 3 feelings you have right now? And his question to me was, how do you get people to go deep on that question? And I said to him, I said, this is how I set it up. And I said some of the things that I'm saying now. And by the end of it, he was revealing things to me that I don't even think he thought he was going to reveal to me. And I said to him, I said, this is exactly what happens when you create the space, when you create the opportunity for people to step into this, they're going to tell you things that you wouldn't expect otherwise.
Yeah, that's so true. When you get into that conversation, and all of a sudden they're like, I don't even know why I'm telling you this. But I
always love when they say, I just want to be honest with you. Okay, up until now, what have you been?
Right. And I do that. I do that. But I can totally see that with you because you have a warm, friendly, inviting personality. And, you know, like the eyes are, you know, very honest. So I can see how people would just start talking and sharing.
And that's when I shut up and listen.
Cool. So let me unmute everybody. There's just a few of us here.
Okay.
So, Pat, I am so glad to see your face now. It's so good to see your face. Anybody have any questions? Chica, I think you might have missed because I typed it in before you got here. The 7 traits of leaders. So I just typed that back in again in chat for you. So if you guys have any questions, Phil's an open book now.
Yes. Hey, Chica.
Hi. Yeah, my internet connection's really unstable. So everything, you guys just sound like robots, Daleks. So I'm going to observe and I'll try and catch what you're saying, but it's very unstable, my connection.
Okay.
You've all frozen right now. You're like this. It's okay. I think it's from my end. But you guys carry on. When it becomes more stabilized, I'll join in.
Excellent. Thank you. Good morning, Pat. Any questions for me?
Yeah, I got a couple. I always have a ton of questions.
I know you do. Thank you.
Let's try stump him.
Yes.
Oh, still this plays Stump Phil. No, I'm going to lose that game. I don't like to lose. So can you talk a little bit about that idea I think you and I talked about, or you posted either intergenerational coaching and leadership or cross, what did you call it? Cross-gender leadership and relationships in coaching and leadership. I think that's really interesting, and it's probably a subject that hasn't been talked about enough.
Thank you. So going back to my career, if you remember what I said earlier, I like to be the risk taker. I like to be fearless. And so that seems to be playing out as an entrepreneur because I'm willing to take on these subjects that quite frankly are new to being talked about, a little bit controversial, et cetera, et cetera. And one of them is cross-gender mentoring, and the other is the intergenerational workforce. So for me, it's, again, it goes back to how can you put the other person at ease? How can you put the other person in a situation that relaxes them such that they're going to open up and talk to you? And it takes those things that Vickie and I were talking about, making the eye contact, being authentic, the gestures that you do, that type of stuff. And I will tell you, I think this conversation is going to get bigger before it gets smaller, because I've seen recently as many as 3 articles about this. And what infuriates me about it, and I said that word intentionally, is that each side digs in their heels rather than looking for the ways that they can work with each other. For example, I read recently that men are terrified of working with women for the fear of, and women are terrified of working with men because of the fear of. And the reality is that when you come together in these professional situations and you put in place expectations and boundaries and all of that, there's no reason for that to be an issue. There's no reason for that to be a concern. We can talk human to human.
So what would be your advice to someone, let's say, that we would call an elder in the workplace, someone who is, an elder simply means older than. It doesn't mean an old fart like
older than dirt.
Yeah, exactly.
But the fact is that the older generation in the workforce is sometimes being pushed out or even disrespected. Mm-hmm. Because what I noticed as I continued to work, people didn't respond to me the same way they used to.
Exactly.
But I didn't seem to have credibility, especially with the millennials. And that created that bridge where I, as the old guy, was constantly criticizing the millennials. Oh, they're always on their cell phones and they don't know what they're talking about and all this. And of course, they look at us and with the same kinds of criticisms. He doesn't even know how to use his cell phone. He probably still has a flip phone. And
right.
So, what could one person do in that kind of culture to bridge that gap between those generations?
Thank you. So I think there's 2 things you can do. One, being in a leadership position, depending on the amount of authority you have in that organization, step out, take the risk, create that by yourself, right? Be the one who steps into that space that hasn't been stepped into yet. Complementing that, what I would do is formalize it. So formalize it in the sense of inviting people to a meeting, have an agenda, do some things. So 1, be the leader, step out and do it. And 2, create a structure that gives the people the feeling of, the false feeling, I will say that, the false feeling of having some idea of what might happen through it. So if I show up at this meeting with Pat's a leader, he's an elder, and as a result of going through this with him, 5 meetings in, I'll have a better understanding of the things that he's leaving behind for this organization.
Yeah. Good advice. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I got a lot more, but I'm going to turn it over to somebody else.
All right. We can talk more at breakfast next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who is V40 Think?
Yeah, who is that?
Huh? They're not talking. They're not muted.
Michael, are you on?
Yeah.
Okay, do you have a question for me?
No, I'm just listening.
Oh,
yeah. Who was the guy with the 5 words?
What's that?
Who was the guy with the 5 words?
The one who responded, the one who listened.
Oh, okay.
So for those of you who don't know, Michael is my husband. He's downstairs, and I asked him to listen in on this rather than fold the laundry because he's an amazing husband. He was going to do the laundry this morning. And I asked him, please, can you come on and see me? And so now I'm sure I'm going to go downstairs and we'll have a great debrief, right?
Yeah.
Well, Michael, you're lucky. My husband's name is Michael as well, and I tell him he's not allowed to come on any of my stuff because I don't want him to hear anything that I have to say.
Here's what I know, Vickie. When I go down, that will be a new rule.
Probably from now on.
There you go. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Chica, how are you? Any questions?
Yeah, I'm fine. The internet stabilized. I've come downstairs, so it seems a bit better. I missed, obviously, 15 minutes or so of what you were speaking about. So it's difficult to get an idea as to kind of contribution in terms of the question. So
Okay.
I do have leadership type of questions. You see, what I know your book is about what makes a great, you know, how in terms of not just what makes a great leader, but stepping into the shoes of being that great leader. And you believe that everybody is potentially a leader.
Yes.
It's just something that you have to kind of own that and groom yourself to be that. Okay, so so someone like myself, okay, people always say to me, you're a great leader, Chika, but I shy away from that. I've always associated it with control and, you know, and myself, as you know, growing up and being at school and things like that, I've, when it comes to authority, or, you know, when I finished university and I started work, I always found that a lot of the leaders was like very, what's the word? Divide and rule. It was very negative. Mm-hmm. Away from anything that connects me to leadership, even though I do know I have leadership qualities, but it's almost like I just don't want to connect myself with that word. So I don't know if that's something that just needs healing, or how would you?
Here's what I would offer to you. So for me, everything is about the dance between the ego and the soul spirit, right? So in the beginning, yes, I was a very high control leader because I thought that was the way things got done. And so that was all driven by ego. Then what happened was I shifted to the soul and the spirit, which is focused on people. And what I realized was that when I lead with people and the people interactions, that the things that my ego's looking for, like results and turnarounds and so on, those things come. So it's about who you choose.
Right.
Do you choose to lead as a soul person, spirited, or do you choose to lead as, and we all have examples of both of them in our lives. So it really is a conscious shift to make. And that's why I wrote the book that I did, because the book is really about taking those essential traits that we all have and utilizing them for good, not evil. Not to say the ego is bad. It's just let it have its stance.
No, I totally get you. That's why I just kind of went off on my own tangent. But in terms of what you're saying, it makes complete sense. And I think to kind of draw back into what you're saying, I think part of the fear for me, in terms of, you know, incorporating all of me into that leadership, so be more of a holistic leader, is the fear of, just say there are some evil ones who kind of slip beneath your radar. How do you deal with them?
Right.
You know, and
well, I will tell you, I came out as a gay man in 1982 in the corporate position at a time when people were losing their jobs for that. And what was interesting about it wasn't my ego that wanted to be known as a gay man. It was my spirit that said, you can't live authentically and be a leader hiding something about yourself. So 6 weeks into my job, I came out and never looked back.
Right.
Hey, Phil, could I make a quick comment about what Chika just said? Mm-hmm. I'm sure this is in your book too. Is Chika, do you have a mentor or a coach?
Yeah.
Because even on virtual communication, even on video, I see great leadership qualities in you. You have a beautiful energy and a beautiful spirit that just comes through, even on video. And a great coach or a mentor can help you begin to see yourself really more accurately in light of those strengths. I just wanted to make that comment.
Oh, was that directed at myself or at you, Phil? But thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's amazing comment. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
All right.
I know you said you could ask Phil more questions. Do you have any more that you'd like to ask before we wrap things up?
I have one quick question for you, Vickie.
Sure.
Who are you and what do you do? The title was Webinar Writers, so I'm interested in that.
Well, the title should have been Easy Writer Guest Expert Series. So I am a book coach and content marketing strategist. As a result of working with me, my clients become best-selling authors. They're able to share their story worldwide, grow their following and fan base, and turn readers into clients. So Phil and Chika are two of the people that are in Easy Writer during this last live session. So as part of what we are doing as practicing for sharing our stories and sharing what is inside our books so that other people can have an experience of that, we're doing these expert series so that we can share that with the world and also practice, because practice makes everything better, right? As we do these videos, these are probably going to be similar stories and similar tips and similar questions that each person in the program would get, like if they were going to be on stage, because most authors want to be speakers as well. So this is part of that practice. And I know for me, getting really good at speaking on stage was because I did so many interviews and I did so many presentations and I did so many videos online, so that even last year I was at an event and the speaker did not show up. And there's this room full of people and there's no speaker, and the volunteer stands up and she says, I'm really sorry, this particular workshop isn't happening because the speaker isn't here. You can network amongst yourselves, you know, whatever you want to do. And I raised my hand and I said, well, I can talk about how to share your story if you'd like, because that's pretty important. And she said, sure. And everybody was all game. And so I hopped up and I did a 30-minute presentation, opened it up for questions and stuff. And I really feel like that experience has fired me up for making sure that my clients and participants in my group are as prepared, because these things happen all the time. People drop out, don't show up, get sick, you know, whatever. Take those opportunities and jump up and do it.
Okay.
Thank you for asking, Pat.
Thank you.
What do you do?
But you got another. This is a whole story similar. I've just left my job as dean of the School of Business at a small university here in San Antonio. I'm 76 years old, and you know, like the people say when you go skydiving, they say, "Why would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane?" You know, a lot of people say, well, why would you jump out of a perfectly good job at 76 when you can't go back into the job market? But I wanted to go out on my own, and I do Chapter 4 Coaching is the name of my little coaching venture. And my main focus is on helping people transform their lives by developing healthy bodies and healthy minds, and especially working in this modern elder movement where I'm trying to help people through these life transitions as they age. And it gets more and more difficult. And it usually starts around 40, when you have that horrible 40-year-old birthday party where they give you those black balloons and those over-the-hill cards, and they start making fun of you. And then it gets worse and worse and worse.
You know, the 40s have been very good for me. I got 2 more years in the 40s, and I'll be in the 50s. And I would have to say the decade of the 40s was the best for me.
Well, you're doing it right then.
Yes.
Congratulations. So that's what I'm doing right now anyway, trying to do.
Awesome.
I want to write a book. I want to write a book. Phil's inspired me. Phil's inspired me to write a book, and I made the commitment, but that damn blank sheet of paper, that blank screen is still staring me in the space and causing blood to ooze out of my forehead.
Well, that's why you need somebody to coach you who's done it. I've got 97 best-selling authors. Phil was number 97. And I have 10 best-selling books of my own. So we can talk about that if you want. A little bit later, Chicken can probably tell you a little bit about it as well. And everybody there has stared at that blank screen. And there is a way out of that blank screen. You just need some help.
Exactly.
Awesome. Phil, so let's wrap this thing up.
Okay.
I would love for you to share one of the biggest learnings that you had from transitioning from being in corporate to now being a coach. Was there a shift somewhere in your thinking that you had to change? So like whatever it is, what's been the biggest thing for you?
Okay, so thank you for this question. And here's the thing that comes right to mind right now. So when I was in my corporate career, I was highly sought after. So what that meant was when I worked for one company for 18 years, I was continually being sought after. Come and work in my organization. Come and work in my division. When I developed my reputation as a leader, consultant, and turnaround guy, companies were recruiting me. Come work for me. Come work for me. So there was this energy of, inviting me in, calling me in. Then I became an entrepreneur, and I realized that that's a whole different dynamic. At least it's been a whole different dynamic for me, that rather than being invited in, I keep showing up at places that, quite frankly, I'll go anywhere where they have I'll go anywhere where they don't have a sign, do not enter, right? If it's this kind of organization or that kind of organization, I'm jumping into it. So the difference is I was being pulled in and invited in, and now I'm showing this fearlessness and courage and going into situations. Women in Leadership Symposium in San Antonio, I think it was in February, 500 women and about 10 men. I went to it. So I wasn't invited to it, and yet when I went there, I was like, this is the place I've got to be. So I think that was probably one of the biggest learnings is people aren't knocking down my door, calling me, sending me emails and saying, oh yeah, you're the best thing ever. It's who are you? And so when I show up, then I can tell them who I am. So that was a big, big learning.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank
Great.
you.
Well, thank you for all your tips and stories and everything today. It was really great. I'm sure everybody would agree. I know, Chica, you can watch this again a little bit later and rewatch the part in the beginning where Phil shares his story.
Thank you.
We appreciate you, Pat, for being on. And Michael, tell them we all say hello and goodbye again.
Okay.
And yeah, I really appreciate your time, Phil, and thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you so much. This was a great opportunity. I appreciate everyone. Thank you.